Hello everyone and welcome back to the Dungeon Learner's Guide. Today we've got another of our daily Pride Month decks. This is deck number 16 and it's titled Fluidity. And if you haven't seen the first half of these episodes, it's crazy to me that we're halfway through, but we are building a Magic the Gathering commander deck using two non-partner commanders, working with a budget of $100 or less and using this as a way to celebrate the diversity of the LGBTQ+ community for all of June through the use of Magic the Gathering. So today, our two partners are going to be Orvar the Allform and Moret of the Frost. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce Moret, so if I am pronouncing it wrong, please correct me. But both of them, you'll notice, are shapeshifters, and if you know anything about the gender fluid community, they are kind of like shapeshifters. I don't know how they do it. They're all beautiful and amazing, and I love them all, but however they managed to do it, I wanted to do my best to give them a representation in our deck today. So starting off, we have Orvar the Allform, which is 3 and a blue for a 3/3 legendary creature shapeshifter. It's got Changeling, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, if it targets one or more other permanents you control, create a token that's a copy of one of those permanents. Then, when a spell or ability an opponent controls causes you to discard this card, create a token that's a copy of target permanent. As you may be able to guess, we're probably not discarding Orvar. I feel like something has gone very wrong if we're doing that, but it's nice to be able to copy things. Moret, on the other hand, is 2 green blue for a 0/0 legendary snow creature shapeshifter. It also has Changeling, and you may have Moret enter the battlefield as a copy of a permanent you control, except it's legendary and snow in addition to its other types. And if it's a creature, it enters with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it and has Changeling. So there's a couple of different things that are kind of in play with these that we'll go into in just a second, but I do want to highlight that both of these cards specify that they can copy or become a copy of a permanent, not a non-land permanent, any permanent. And that's going to be incredibly important as we start to pick apart our themes for today. And our first one is, of course, going to be targeting creatures. It's very powerful for us to copy a spell that targets a creature or copy a creature that is targeted by a spell, so we may as well also benefit from doing what our deck wants to do anyway, with cards like Wild Defiance, which is 2 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of an instant or sorcery spell, that creature gets +3/+3 until the end of turn. Being able to target a creature with a spell, make a copy of it with Orvar, and then still give it +3/+3 is going to give us a tremendous way to win the game, because we're going to be very good at going wide in this deck, but we're not going to have a ton of power among our creatures, so Wild Defiance is going to give us that little push that we need to take our damage output to the next level. Moving on to our second theme, this one is going to be Landfall. And a good example of that is Scute Swarm, which is 2 and a green for a creature insect. It's a 1/1, and of course it has Landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. If you control 6 or more lands, create a token that's a copy of Scute Swarm instead. So this works in a couple of different ways. If we target Scute Swarm while we have Orvar in play, or if we use Moret to copy Scute Swarm, we can then just have more Scute Swarms. Now, notably, Moret will still be legendary, so that one's a little bit trickier. But what it can let us do is, instead of copying Scute Swarm, we can actually use Orvar to copy our lands. That will still trigger Landfall, it'll get us a lot more lands a lot quicker, and then it'll make copies of the Scute Swarm anyway. And so that then leads us to our final theme, which is targeting any permanent. So something like Emerald Charm is 1 green for an instant, and it says choose one. You can untap target permanent, destroy target non-aura enchantment, or target creature loses flying until end of turn. I'll be perfectly honest, the bottom 2 abilities are not really why it's here, but for the ability for 1 green mana at instant speed to untap target permanent means that we can target our lands. And that is where we're going to get most of our value in this deck, because we can copy our lands, trigger our landfall, and be able to untap those lands with Emerald Charm to produce an additional mana. Because notably, if you create a token copy of a land with Orvar, it will just come in, you can use it to make mana, and all of a sudden we can get super far ahead of our opponents by, like I said, getting more lands, getting more creatures, getting more landfall, and then just running over our opponents. Anyway though, those are our themes for today, and the next thing we're going to do is take a look at some key cards, and these are cards that are kind of like the win conditions or the MVPs of the deck. So starting off, we have Doppelgang, one of my personal favorite cards that's come out in the last few years. It is XXX for a green-blue, which basically means that we would have to spend 5 mana to make X equal 1, but trust me, it's worth it, because it's a sorcery that says for each of X target permanents, create X tokens that are copies of that permanent. So the way that this math works out is if we spend 5 mana, we get 1 copy of 1 permanent. If we spend 8 mana, we get 2 copies of 2 permanents. 11 mana, I think that's how that works out, right? 3, 6, 9, 10, 11. 11 mana gets us 3 copies of 3 permanents. And yes, that can be any permanent, that can be land. So if we can get up to 11 mana, which is very easy with this deck, cast this for X equals 3, we can target 3 of our lands, we can then make a copy of one of them with Orvar, and then we're going to make 3 additional copies of each of those lands, essentially doubling our mana, going from 11 up to 21 mana with just a single spell. And all of those lands will come in untapped, which we can then use for other things. That's also 10 lands coming in that's going to trigger our landfall effects. This is a tremendous way to jump ahead just multiple turns in a game and put ourselves in a position where it's nearly impossible to lose. Moving on though, to our next key card. This one is Gargos Vicious Watcher. Now, admittedly, we don't have a ton of removal in this deck, so Gargos functions as one of our best removal pieces. It is 3 green for an 8/7 legendary creature Hydra. It has Vigilance. Hydra spells you cast cost 4 less to cast. Pretty sure this is our only Hydra, so that's kind of irrelevant. But the most important part is whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell, Gargos Vicious Watcher fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. Given the fact that Gargos is an 8/7 creature, it is very likely that we can target something and then immediately fight an 8/7 and just remove whatever it is we're trying to remove. Now, the nice thing about this is it fights up to 1 target creature, so if there is something on board that could kill Gargos, we do not have to fight that thing. But if there is something on board that can kill Gargos, sounds to me like that is a great target for some of our copy effects. Moving on though to our final key card. This one is Bushwhack. And I know, bear with me on this before I start talking about a random standard common and why it's probably one of the best cards in our deck. Bushwhack is a green mana for a sorcery that says choose 1, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle, or target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. So while this is a very simple card and kind of underwhelming in most of its abilities, it's perfect for our deck, because what we can do is of course get a basic land, which is nice, we can fix things, we can get a little bit more mana if we need it, but it's also just a 1 mana target effect that's also a removal spell. So we can copy something with Orvar by targeting it with Bushwhack, and then also still remove an opponent's creature. And so 1 mana to copy a spell and also remove something is very, very powerful. And if we have Gargos in play, we can actually kill 2 things because we'll target our own thing and have it fight, and then Gargos fight something, plus we would still get a copy with Orvar. So Bushwhack is actually very powerful in our deck, and one of the best reasons why adding green to an Orvar list is probably going to push it over the edge. Anyway though, that leads us to the end of our key cards for today, so the next thing we're going to do is take a look at some cool interactions. And these are cards that synergize really well with each other, but in a lot of cases are just fun cards that I want to highlight. So the first pair of cool interactions is going to be between Mystic Reflection and Avenger of Zendikar. And this is a set of cards that can probably just end games if you do it correctly. So we are going to say, just for sake of argument, that Mystic Reflection, which is normally 1 in a blue for an instant, choose target non-legendary creature. The next time one or more creatures or planeswalkers enter the battlefield this turn, they enter as copies of the chosen creature, plus it has Foretell for 1 blue mana. Avenger of Zendikar is 5 green, so 7 total mana, for a 5/5 creature elemental. When it enters, create a 0/1 plant creature token for each land you control. Then it has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, you may put a +1/+1 counter on each plant creature you control. Now, this is where we're going to test my math skills to see if I can get these numbers right. But if we assume the minimum amount of mana needed to cast both of these spells on the same turn, which is going to be 8 mana, so 5 green for the Avenger and 1 blue for Mystic Reflection if it's foretold, so we can cast Avenger of Zendikar, and then it will come in and trigger its ability to make plant tokens. With that ability on the stack, you can cast Mystic Reflection to target the Avenger of Zendikar, meaning that the next time a creature would enter the battlefield, it enters as a copy of Avenger. Avenger sees us having 8 lands, will then make 8 plant tokens, but because of Mystic Reflection, there are now 8 Avenger of Zendikars. Each of those Avengers of Zendikar is then going to make 8 plant tokens on their own. So that's 8 times 8, which is, 64? And then we also have 9 Avengers of Zendikar, so we play a single land, it triggers every single Avenger, they all get +9 +1/+1 counters, and then all of a sudden we have a massive army that can probably deal with anything at the table, and unless our opponents can find a way to board wipe in the next turn cycle, it's going to absolutely demolish every other player sitting there. But that's only cool interaction number 1, so moving on to cool interaction number 2, we have Venerated Rot Priest and Aggressive Biomancy. So Venerated Rot Priest, another of our main win conditions when looking at targeting, it is 1 green mana for a 1/2 Phyrexian Druid. It has Toxic 1, and whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell, target opponent gets a poison counter. So if we can target our own things 10 times, that will give one player 10 poison counters and it will knock them out of the game. And one of the best ways we can do that is with Aggressive Biomancy, which is XX green-blue for a sorcery, create X tokens that are copies of target creature you control, except they have, when this creature enters the battlefield, it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. Honestly, the fighting effect is kind of negligible when compared to some of the other fight effects we have like Bushwhack and Gargos, but being able to make, say, 5-6 copies of Venerated Rot Priest, which is not difficult, means that all we have to do is cast 1 to 2 spells to kill each player at the table, and that ends the game incredibly quickly. Because each Venerated Rot Priest will give out poison counters when our things are targeted, so if we have 5 total Venerated Rot Priests, we target 2 creatures, each one of them will trigger twice, we've now given 10 poison counters to a player. So this is a way that we can end the game very quickly, especially if our opponents have ways to prevent combat damage, because most of our win conditions are going to rely on combat damage, so it's nice to have a little bit of a backup. That, though, is just about the end of our deck tech for today, so the last thing we have to do is take a look at the price of the deck, which is $57.08, with the most expensive card in the deck being Royal Elemental at $12.06. And Royal Elemental is 3 blue for a 3/2 elemental. It's got flying and landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may gain control of target creature for as long as you control Royal Elemental. This is one of those cards that, when used properly, can steal the biggest threats at the table, or probably just every threat at the table, but this is a phenomenal card to copy with Orvar and Moret, because that means that every time a land enters, we are gaining control of multiple creatures every single turn. And that can be very powerful when not only are we gaining control of multiple creatures per land drop, but we can make multiple land drops in a turn. Now, with that being said, it is a very expensive card, and cutting it would trim the price of the deck to about $45. So if you want a much more budget-friendly version of this deck, you can cut Royal Elemental for another sweet landfall card. There are plenty of them out there that we couldn't include. That, though, is the end of our deck tech for today. So thank you so much to everyone for watching, for enjoying the content so far. I've had a ton of fun putting out these daily Pride Month decks. And of course, we're going to keep going until we get to the end of June. So 30 decks in total. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would like the video and subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you want to go above and beyond, you can find us over on Patreon or right here on YouTube as a channel member. So a shout out to all of our current patrons and channel members. Thank you all for all of your support. I hope everyone has a wonderful Pride Month, and I will see you on the other side of the Dungeon Learner's Guide.